Happy New Year everyone, Ken here. Now 2015 was one heck of a year for video games. Alongside a mammoth quantity of healthy and decidedly less healthy debate around the medium and those who engage with it, 2015 managed to bring us one of the most jam-packed offerings of top-notch, high-quality releases in years. Now there's plenty to be said about the multitude of magnificence that came our way over the past 12 months, and indeed I do plan to offer up my own thoughts on the topic over the coming weeks. But before we sit back and reflect on the past, I fancy taking a moment to see what lies ahead over the coming 12 months. Of course, none of these titles are certain to be here this year. Such is the way of development that I would be rather confident in stating in fact that not all of these titles will release in 2016. Many of them will, however, as will many games we haven't even heard of yet, and some which may still be a twinkle in the developer's eye as we're talking about these. So for the time being, I've picked out the 16 games that you should be most excited for in 2016. Let's kick things off with one of the year's big early releases, XCOM 2. XCOM 2 is the follow-up to 2012's reboot, XCOM Enemy Unknown. Wonderfully, developers Firaxis decided that the canonical ending to that original game would be that the human race lost their fight against the invading alien forces, which is certainly a believable outcome, especially if you played on Iron Man or any of the higher difficulty levels. This means that XCOM 2 sees the world under the rule of said forces, and you take control of a roving force of rebels attempting to wrest back control from the invaders. Expect plenty of familiar aspects if you've played the previous entry. The side-on base construction returns, allowing you to outfit your home facility, which is built inside a scavenged alien transport ship with a variety of research, development, intelligence, medical facilities, and so on and so forth. The in-mission combat will feature the same grid-based movement and cover systems, with plenty of careful planning and tactics required if you're going to complete your objectives without losing all your key members of staff. It's going to be an even tougher fight than Enemy Unknown, and quite frankly, I can't wait to scramble every last scrap of hope together and struggle against the odds for the survival of the human race, and inevitably have it all go wrong. Okay, that was quite an intense start, so if trying to keep an entire squad of survivors alive does sound a little bit intense for you, how about a game where you only have to worry about looking after yourself? That sounds a little bit more pleasant. Oh wait, no, hang on. It's Dark Souls 3. Oh, Dark Souls, how I love you so. I doubt there are too many people out there now who don't have some opinion on the series one way or another, which seems like a rather spectacular ascent from where both Demons and Dark Souls were at the time of their release. Such a rise to power speaks to From Software's creations then. They may be divisive, but there's no denying that for the people who love them, there are a few other titles that hit their marks more spectacularly. Even within fans of the series, there are advocates and detractors for every entry. Personally, I enjoyed Dark Souls 2 well enough, but it felt like it was missing that special spark, and Bloodborne really rediscovered it for me. So I suppose there may be some credence to that Miyazaki magic, or at least from my own personal tastes. As much as I adore Bloodborne, however, it does sacrifice a lot of variety in world design and in character building to fit things into quite a tight aesthetic. That didn't bother me during my time engrossed in Yharnam, but I am very much excited to return to the more open-ended approach that the Dark Souls series offers. I haven't been paying too much close attention to the precise details of Dark Souls 3 so far, because it is very much a game I want to see in its whole form complete, rather than attempting to pick apart pieces of the scraps that have been thrown out early to sate initial appetite. And that said though, Miyazaki's team are huge fans of mystery, intrigue and misdirection, as Bloodborne proved even further. So I'm sure there will be plenty to discover and to pore over once Dark Souls 3 rolls around early this year. It's currently scheduled for worldwide release in April. Right, okay, those last two games were a little bit oppressive, weren't they? Let's find something a little bit more uplifting, something that can put a smile on your face and bring joy and warmth to your heart. Here we go. Cuphead. They say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and I could probably write 100,000 words and attempt to sell you on Cuphead, and it would achieve much less than just watching a few seconds of footage, so I'll save myself the trouble and we can just sit and take a look at The gorgeous art style, the animation, the music. I wouldn't even really consider myself a big fan of side-scrolling shooters, and yet I feel incredibly compelled to get my hands on Cuphead. Were it not for reassurances from multiple people who have played it, I'd almost be skeptical you could really control it. It's bizarro 1930s cartoons in a video game, and it's just dripping style from every orifice. It's delightful. Speaking of visual delight, let's just hop straight into something else that's going to be absolutely gorgeous, and I'm certain of it, but this one might eat up a little bit more of your time than Cuphead. That's right, JRPG's Big Daddy, Final Fantasy, is back in town in 2016. I said at the outset of 2015 that I didn't think that would be Final Fantasy 15's year, and honestly I didn't really want it to be. I don't know where I could have squeezed it in. But while I'm sad that we missed out on the potential 15 year numbering synergy, I do think 2016 is going to be the year that we get our hands on the roving band of J-pop funsters and their oversized, outrageous swords and magic. I've been a long-time fan of Final Fantasy for quite some time now, and possibly one of the few people who's actually enjoyed all of the recent main series iterations. The thing which immediately caught my eye way back when Final Fantasy 15 was first shown off was the combat system. At the time it was impossible to tell how it would actually play out in game, but it did look unlike anything really that the series has had previously. Now Final Fantasy is certainly a series that changes up its systems dramatically between every entry, and in fact I'd suggest that the desire they have to offer up a fresh experience with each adventure is one of the core reasons why I keep coming back. But this one feels like perhaps the most dramatic shift they've had to date. Recent gameplay demos, including that playable one they offered for people who bought Type 0 HD, seem to have all but confirmed that. It also, as I mentioned at the start, looks simply gorgeous, with spectacle on show in many of the trailers, including larger encounters, the grand cities, and of course the summons. It's all enough to leave my mouth agape. That should come as no surprise from a series so trumpeted for its visuals as Final Fantasy, but it doesn't make me any less excited to get my hands on it and experience that spectacle for first hand. Now, from one eager group of Japanese youths grinding away against deadly monsters to another, because it's time to talk Persona 5. Oh boy, we're really going to have the duel of the JRPGs in 2016, aren't we? I think so. Well, while Final Fantasy has long been kind of sitting atop the pile, it does feel more and more like Persona has been building up an almost unstoppable momentum across fans of the genre. After a brief initial brush with Persona 3 and its quite literally mind-blowing evokers, I was introduced to the series more fully with Persona 4, and it really didn't take long to see why so many people were in love with it. The wonderful balance of living your daily life, going to school, doing homework, hanging out with your friends, all juxtaposed against this fighting through surreal dungeons against the manifestations of people's secret inner desires. Everything kind of wrapped up in a gorgeous package filled with some of the most memorable characters, fun moments and catchy music tracks to ever make their way into a video game. Once you've experienced the world of Persona, you won't soon forget it. Now, Persona 5 also does follow the life of another hot teen who's just transferred to a new high school in a new town and has to deal with the troubles of everyday teenage life while also contending with those aforementioned mysterious forces. Expect to see an early appearance from Syria's regular Igor, but after that, anything goes. Reassuringly, the series' composer and producer Shoji Meguro is returning, which all but ensures a raft of hot jams that'll be stuck in my head for years to come. I put Persona 5 atop my most anticipated list at the start of last year, but much like Final Fantasy 15, I didn't actually expect that we'd get to see Atlus's banner RPG then. I do think that 2016 is going to be that year though, so get ready for two of the biggest franchises coming out of Japan to clash for your time in 2016. At this early stage, I think Persona has my heart, but I fully expect to lose a lot of hours to both of those releases this year. Okay, that's probably enough hefty, intense, mechanics-driven RPGs for now. Let's take a step back from thinking about buffs and debuffs and elemental weaknesses and building your correct team composition, and just head out on a relaxing intergalactic sightseeing tour with No Man's Sky. I have to know. I have to know. Although, saying that, I do feel as though we have a pretty good idea about what No Man's Sky is all about at this point, but we still need to reach the point where it comes out, everyone gets their hands on it, and we can all make our own decisions about whether it's the game that we've always wanted or not. Now, we do know that it will have billions of procedurally generated planets in a single universe, all being governed by one single creation seed, which means that all players will have the same universe, although any given two of them will likely never see the same parts of it as one another. We know that you can name planets and you can name the species which inhabit those planets if you're the first person to discover them. We know that you can analyze the environment and that you can mine resources and you can upgrade your ship and your suit for further exploration and action. We know that you can engage in space combat, and we know that you can encounter some mysterious on-world police force if you're deemed to be a troublemaker. And yet, despite having a pretty good idea about what's going on, there's still a sort of certain je ne sais quoi, which no one outside of Hello Games seems to be able to put their finger on. Whatever No Man's Sky ends up being, I think I'll enjoy seeing it for myself. However, just in case it turns out that it won't satisfy your lust for intergalactic blood, however, don't fear, because Bethesda have got you covered. Doom! That's right, the rebooted genre definer is set to be unleashed on the world all over again in 2016. I liked parts of what I saw of the game at Bethesda's E3 showing, although I still think there is absolutely room for a well-made game that plays with the simplicity and speed of the original Doom, which this really isn't going to be. That said, it does look weighty and visceral and brutal, packed with violent, up-close kill moves and an arsenal of the beefiest weapons that you're going to see outside of the Adult Movie Awards. I'm glad they chose to step away from the more survival-style elements of Doom 3, which had their novelty but kind of felt out of place for a franchise so deeply rooted in the simplistic joy of pumping round after round into terrifying hellbeasts until they collapse in a pile of meaty chunks and rib cages. The modern tech also looks like it will enable some of the most iconic monsters from Doom's demonic cast to be realised at the scale and sheer size that they actually deserve, which could lead to some breathtaking encounters. Throw in multiplayer that allows you to play as creatures such as the Revenant, and that Shades of Time Splitters multiplayer level creation tool Snap Map, and you have my attention. Okay, now that your desire for demonic slaughter en masse has been reasonably sated, let's slow things down once again and talk about Jonathan Blow's imminent atmospheric puzzler, The Witness. The Witness might be the closest we get to Braid creator Jonathan Blow's magnum opus. It was originally announced back in 2008 following the successful launch of Braid, and it has apparently evolved through an extensive development cycle which has seen Blow pour time and money into perfecting his vision. It harkens back to the days of classic puzzler Myst, with the player set on an island where they're free to explore and solve the various puzzles they encounter around the world, and doing so progress deeper into certain areas. The narrative has been kept largely a secret, although it has been said that the player is trying to work out who they are, where they are, and why they ended up there, that sort of thing. Blow himself has stated that his original intent was to create around an 8-hour experience, and yet his most recent estimates have put the total for the finished game to be around the 50 to 80 hour mark. Now that's certainly a mammoth feat for what's seemingly a puzzle game, so it will be fascinating to see how much the tasks on offer differ over the course of the game and whether it can stand up to that length of play without ever feeling stale. That said, its launch date early in the year may make it a perfect game to kind of dip into in short bursts, play for a while until you hit a wall, only to go away, play something else, and then return a few days later and take a fresh approach at whatever was stumping you. And when you do inevitably hit those walls, what better way to take out your frustrations than with a few bouts of good old street fighting? Now, I'd always been more of a 3D fighters guy until Street Fighter 4 came along. I knew that people had a lot of love for 2D fighting games, and I spent a little time with the likes of Street Fighter 2, but I never really grasped the fundamental concepts and the mechanics. I didn't know how to do a Shoryuken or throw a fireball. However, when Street Fighter IV arrived on the scene, the chatter about it was so intense and enthusiastic that I felt compelled to finally give it a proper shot. Everything just kind of lined up for me. Starting at launch meant that I wasn't trying to play a game people had been spending years learning inside and out. One of my close friends had played enough of the old series to understand the mechanics and help me to learn them, but he wasn't familiar enough that he'd be completely trouncing me, so we were on fairly even footing. And we were also in first year of university, so there was plenty of free time to spend practicing. And we spent some time practicing. Fast forward to now, and Street Fighter IV in its many iterations is absolutely one of my favourite games of all time. It's a joy to play every single time I turn it on, and it's just as much fun to watch pretty much every single time I turn on a stream. Whether it's, watching big money games on the competitive scene, or whether I'm sitting at home and just watching some friends sparring. I was fortunate enough to get my hands on the Street Fighter V beta without pre-ordering for it, and although I haven't had a ton of time to spend with them, I'm already loving how simultaneously familiar and yet completely different everything feels. The roster's been shaping up pretty excellently. The V-meter stuff is all a really neat replacement for the Ultra mechanic from Street Fighter IV, and the way they've been talking about post-release support, buying DLC characters with earnable in-game fight money, it all sounds incredibly promising. It kind of sounds like Capcom actually maybe know what they're doing here. They've got a good plan in action. And also that the first run of that DLC character list does include both Ibuki and Yuri, so thanks to whoever at Capcom was paying attention to the personal wish list I sent them. While Capcom is off preparing a brave new future for Street Fighter, Ubisoft has taken one of their biggest and most consistent franchises and is hurling it deep into the past with Far Cry Primal. Now, I liked Far Cry 2 quite a fair bit. I loved Far Cry 3 and I adored Far Cry 4, so although they're kind of similar games, the progression through that core series has very much been an upward curve for me. While it is certainly a prime example of that Ubisoft open world game template that we hear so much about, it pulls off almost every aspect of it to a much more satisfying degree than just about anything else can manage. Yes, it has climbing towers, but climbing towers in Far Cry is a rickety, creaking joy. Yes, it has side quests littering the map, but they feel like genuinely pleasing distractions rather than simple box-ticking busy work. Yes, it has camps to clean out, but it's intense and thrilling, whether you're doing it alone or whether you're doing it cooperatively with a friend. It feels unique and it feels fresh and it feels mechanically satisfying, where a lot of their other games don't always manage that. And I think a lot of that comes down to just how tight those Far Cry mechanics are at this point, whether you're shooting, sneaking, gliding, driving, whatever. Every aspect of that gameplay is easy to grasp and it's fun to engage with. And with that said, we are getting to the point where it is starting to feel a tad repetitive. I probably would still play a straight up Far Cry 5, because I know I'd have a good time. But I'm beginning to suspect that partway through I'd start to wonder why. I'd start to wonder why am I not just playing more Far Cry 4 at this point? I don't want to burn out on something which is riding so high right now, so I'm glad to see that they're trying to take Primal in a slightly new direction. Whether it'll end up being a mere reskin and 5 minutes in you'll find some kind of mystical cyber AK-47, or whether it will feel genuinely original remains to be seen, but a different game wrapped around those core mechanics but layered with a new approach is a pretty easy sell for me. Perhaps I'm just getting soft. After all, I did just praise first-person platforming sequences, so maybe that's just me. Speaking of travelling through time though, 2016 is also set to see a remastered release of one of my favourite time-hopping video games, and possibly one of my favourite video games of all time, Maniac Mansion Day of the Tentacle. Now, I'm not quite sure where I got my copy of the original Day of the Tentacle. It's just one of those games that my parents collected during my childhood. I suspect it may have come from a specific family friend who was responsible for slipping quite a few old PC classics my way, but I could be mistaken. Regardless of its origin though, Day of the Tentacle was a wonderful introduction for young Ken to the world of the point-and-click adventure game. I wasn't actually able to finish it initially, it was too complicated for my young brain, but I returned a few years later, a little bit older, a little bit wiser, and pushed past that puzzle that had trounced me before, and I managed to complete the remaining half of the game. Now, I'm certainly not alone in my love of it. Day of the Tentacle is still widely considered to be one of the finest titles in its genre. Clever puzzles, funny humour, just a lovely art style. Industry legends Tim Schafer and Dave Grossman weave this hilarious and wacky tale of three friends cast through time in an attempt to put a stop to the mutated and power-hungry purple tentacle before he can take on the world. It's still playable now through the use of Scum VM, and indeed I actually replayed it in that way a few years ago, but I'm incredibly excited both to experience it for myself once more with this fresh new coat of paint, but also to have a really easy way to introduce one of my favourite games of all time to as many people as possible. Definitely get out there and give it a shot.
I feel like I could take all the world.
Now, if point and click puzzling really isn't in your wheelhouse, what about a different kind of puzzling? What about some grab and stab puzzling? That's right, in Blink's Dishonored 2. Now, the first Dishonored is another game that's prone to splitting opinion. I'm definitely more amongst the love squad for this one. I adored the aesthetics and the design of the world. I loved sneaking around on the rooftops and down the alleyways. I loved playing around with Corvo's potent supernatural skill set. And although I did think the binary good-bad ending split that was based pretty much purely on your kill count was a little bit ham-fisted for what they were going for, I did adore pursuing those alternative solutions to each quest. Solutions which, almost uniformly turned out to be more terrifying and horrendous fates for your targets than if you'd just given them the old Requiescat in Pace. Now, Bethesda has shown off very little of their upcoming sequel. They unveiled it officially during that E3 press conference they held, but it was caught in a rather unfortunate Doom Fallout 4 sandwich, and both of those had rather meaty gameplay demos and thus left more of an immediate impression than a short trailer did. And yet, I came away very excited about taking the reins as a grown-up Princess Emily alongside her protector Corvo and seeing what new stories can be told in Dunwall. The city was certainly far from redeemed by the end of the first game, regardless of which way you took things, so I'm sure there'll still be plenty of grimy city streets to wander and ravenous sewer rats to fear. God, they'll eat anything. Wait, what's that? Plague-ridden dank alleyways and gothic architecture sound a tad unpleasant to you? Okay, alright. Well, what better to counter that with then than the Big N and their upcoming new Legend of Zelda. I want to believe that there's been worlds of speculation about where development on the next Legend of Zelda title is right now. With Nintendo's new NX console looming on the horizon, there's been rife speculation that this will see a Twilight Princess style cross-generational launch. Whether that's the case or not, there's every reason to get excited for this latest return to Hyrule. Personally, I'm coming off A Link Between Worlds, which I played early in 2015 in fact, and it was the first full Zelda game I've been through. It hooked me in an instant, and it kept me going for 2 full playthroughs straight. I'm hoping that this new game can do for 3D Zelda what that game did for top-down Zelda, and finally really truly win me over. It's not that I disliked the other games in the series, but I'd never found one that captivated me quite that way until recently. The promise this time of a more open-ended approach, one which sounds more akin to those original stylings of the top-down entries, has certainly piqued my interest. It also doesn't hurt that the footage so far has been simply jaw-dropping to look at. The art style is sublime, the animations are smooth and flowing, and the vistas are lush and spectacular. Across this entire list, it's certainly shaping up to be one heck of a year for good-looking games. The only real doubt with the Legend of Zelda is whether or not it makes it out in 2016, but I'm pretty sure that Ninty would love to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the series, which is this year, with a big new release. Food for thought, at least. But from the bright, gorgeous landscapes of Hyrule to the vibrant, globe-spanning locations of Uncharted 4 now, as we catch up with the latest adventures of Nathan Drake in A Thiefs End. By the time Uncharted 3 arrived, I'd probably had close to my fill of cheeky murder man Nate Drake and his chirpy, whimsical adventures. This wasn't really Naughty Dog's fault, and if anything, it was a testament to the first 2 games in the series that I replayed both of them multiple times in a row and kind of wore myself out on them. I did play through and enjoy the 3rd release, but I never felt any compulsion to return to it once after the credits had rolled. Since then, we've had a few years away from Drake and his friends, and I recently picked up the Nathan Drake collection because it was on sale on PlayStation 4. And to my surprise, I found myself playing through that first game 2.5 times over the course of a week, and I burnt my way straight to the Platinum Trophy, so I guess perhaps it's been long enough for me at least. The series does still certainly need a little bit of freshening up, however. Mechanically it doesn't really hold up these days, but it looks as though Naughty Dog's time developing The Last of Us has given them plenty of new ideas. They look to be incorporating more open-ended environments and bringing across those more substantial stealth mechanics that The Last of Us introduced, which is probably the one real standout improvement that game made to the combat system over the Uncharted series. Whether that will be enough to make this game stand out in 2016 remains to be seen. But personally, I think I'm ready to play another Uncharted game now. And additionally, everything from its name, A Thief's End, to all the talk coming from Naughty Dog and the fact that series lead Amy Hennig left while this game was underway, all kind of suggests that this might actually be the conclusion to Nathan Drake's arc, which Drake's Deception didn't quite manage in the end. Actually, you know what? I mentioned how gorgeous all these games look, but this lush greenery and foliage is kind of getting a bit much. There's too much of it out there. Let's mix things up for a little bit with the clean, pristine, gleaming urban sprawl of Mirror's Edge Catalyst. I'm absolutely on Team Mirror's Edge. That shouldn't come as a surprise at this point. Not only did I talk lovingly about my time clambering about Dunwall in Dishonored, but I praised the relatively simplistic first-person platforming sequences of Far Cry 3 and 4. So I guess it won't shock you too much to learn that I adored a game which provides probably the most satisfying and breathless free-running experience to date. One where you sprint and leap and scramble your way through a gorgeous yet minimalistic future cityscape to this sublime ambient soundtrack. Oh yeah, I'm on Team Mirror's Edge alright. Catalyst is an exciting prospect for fans of the original like myself. It's been described as a much more open world design, which should help to make that parkour feel a little bit more natural and a bit more free-flowing than find the one object that you can climb or grab or push to get to the next area. It's probably red. It's probably red. Look for the red thing, jump on that. The team at DICE also seem well aware of the issues people had with the combat interactions in the first game, and it does sound like, from initial previews, that they're very much sticking to their guns and avoiding sequences where Faith would have to actually do exactly that. It's not going to be a shooter. I just wanted to make a sticking to their guns pun, alright? I'm sorry. Also, Solar Fields, the composer behind that sublime ambient soundtrack I mentioned earlier, is also returning, so we can expect plenty more glorious, evocative soundscapes as we explore the cities. Alright, finally, let's end on something that feels completely new. A lot of the games we've been talking about so far are follow-ups to existing franchises, things from the last generation trying to squeeze their way onto the current one. Middle-aged series, if you like, trying their hardest to stay relevant amongst today's youth. Comparatively, Horizon Zero Dawn is a bratty young teen yelling, "Alright, shut up Gramps, check out this cyber dino, I'm gonna harvest its gizzards." It's certainly fresh and interesting, although it does feel perhaps like one of the more likely titles on this list to slip into next year. We've only really had a few small glimpses at segments of Horizon Zero Dawn so far, but already it's looking as though it has the potential to become one of the first real standout new big budget ideas since the current generation of consoles arrived. It's wonderful to see Guerrilla Games branching out to something so different from all their work with the Killzone series, if only to see what else they're capable of. The bright, colourful landscapes of Horizon's post-apocalyptic world are by themselves enough to make me want to dive in and explore them, even without taking the likes of gameplay and storyline into account. But that doesn't mean you should discount those aspects by any means though, because fiery-haired protagonist Aloy comes equipped with future primitive toolset, the spear and the bow, but future-y. To accompany that, you can seemingly craft a wealth of different arrows for that bow, electrically charged ones, explosive tripwire shots, grapple lines that can tie those hulking cyber dinosaurs down as they roam Horizon's landscapes, and then you can finish them off and scavenge those precious materials from inside them. There's still plenty to be seen about how the majority of the game plays out and where exactly that story might be heading, but everything I've seen of Horizon Zero Dawn so far just makes me want to see more. And that's it. Suffice to say that it's looking like it'll be another fantastic year in gaming. 2015 is going to be really hard to top, but I think that 2016 has a chance to come close at least. It's also probably worth noting that this could be a big year in gaming for another reason. It's the official launch of virtual reality. Final release VR headsets are set to start making their way to market for real this year, so it'll be fascinating watching that unfold. I certainly think the tech is worth people's time, but is it worth the hefty investment that will be required between purchasing VR headsets themselves and purchasing the hardware that will run them, just to have the experiences that are currently on the table? Maybe, maybe not. But there are plenty of other questions too. Is the average home setup going to be accommodating for any VR experience that requires more than just sitting at a desk? Who knows? Ultimately, only time will really tell on this one. The first full release may completely change the way that the world plays games, or, probably more likely, it might remain a thing for the super invested and for the early adopters for those first couple of years, and eventually more compelling software will become widely available, the cost of entry will reach a more mainstream level, and then it will start to pick up. I can't wait to find out where VR goes after the next 12 months, but while I'm not yet ready to invest myself, I would certainly love to give it a shot this year. Okay, let's wrap things up for now. If you weren't already looking forward to another year of fantastic games, hopefully this list has helped you to think about what you might be most interested in coming up. If you've enjoyed the video, be sure to pop that like button and leave me a comment down below to let me know what you're most looking forward to over the next 12 months. If you fancy reading about even more games on their way in 2016, be sure to check out an extended feature over on my blog. If you'd like to see more video content from me, be sure to subscribe to this channel and you'll be kept up to date, or you can pop back whenever. Also be sure to check out my blog on my Twitter page, as I'm sure I'll be no doubt talking in depth about all the games coming out this year across all three of those platforms. Here's to a wonderful 2016. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day and a fantastic year, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers!